I did it all for the money. When the player had to eat, that one the damn thing funny. Hey, I did it all for the money. Hey, I did it all before. Rob people so dope. Gang banging, shooting pistols, running from the dance folks. And I was known for getting anything you asked for. Soft, hard, green, brown, niggas even had throw.
Welcome to the Playing with the Church Money podcast. I'm your host, Brother Will, and y'all see the background. We're going to continue to talk about police reform. So we're going to stay on our police reform series. Today we're going to talk about Leon Martin, Isleta police officer who sexually assaulted someone he pulled over for DUI. The victim in this case felt like she had to go on along with what the police officer wanted her to do. And in this case, after he pulled her over, he told her, "Follow me over here and we'll figure this out." So proceeded to go to a dark, secluded location and told her that if she, had relations with him, that he would talk to the judge and try to make the case go away. And then he proceeded to sexually assault the victim. Now, this is the police officer here, Leon Martin. And a few days later, she came forward. She was scared at the time she was scared, and she came forward and let authorities know what had happened, what had transpired, and that she had went to the hospital and had, contracted chlamydia from the sexual assault as well. They had an investigation, contacted Leon Martin, and he basically admitted to it, and this just goes to show you the attitude that a lot of the law enforcement have, where they feel like they can do anything. They feel anything they want, and this is just another example of that. 22 years old, threw your whole life away. What would lead him to think that he could do that at 22 years old? I mean, is this the mentality of a 22-year-old, or is this the mentality of someone who was trained and this is the accepted type of behavior that we see is allowed? If not, he would not be doing it. So, I mean, we need to understand what is the issue where these law enforcement officials feel like they can rape, kill, beat people with impunity, with free will, whenever they want to. We'll continue to speak on this. We'll follow up this case, but this just goes to show you that there's abuses that this is a small reservation in New Mexico, right outside of a major city. So if this is going on, what else is going on? We are just coming off of a year where we had 114 murders, record murder rate for the city, and at the same time, during the Trump administration, you had laws that were trying to be enforced. When people want to talk about being tough on crime and being tough on criminals, and in an attempt to try to make it harder for criminals to get guns, certain type of laws were enacted, and instead of the law enforcement deciding to enforce these laws, they actually came out and basically said they weren't going to enforce these laws because it was going against their constitutional rights and the constitutional rights of these citizens. Now, the same people are crying about the high number of murders, but not crying about law enforcement not enforcing these crimes. So when you see the crime rate going up, and you see cases like Mr. Leon, we need some of this police reform. Well, you got Mr. Leon here, that you know he's a perfect example of what the problem is with law enforcement. Here's a 22-year-old kid in the prime of his career who feels like he has enough power to go and rape someone, to bribe them with being able to get rid of their charges. Very disturbing, very disturbing. But this just goes to show you that even in the smallest of towns, there will be some kind of corruption. Now, here specifically, in our state, you've had the law enforcement specifically say they are not going to enforce these laws. So then you have a record number of gun crimes. Somehow, these politicians want to make the penalties differ for individuals caught with guns, but no penalty for the people distributing these guns, no penalty for the people buying these guns, making these, what do they call it, straw purchases, that all these guys are crying and whining about. So, I mean, it just goes to show you there's a lot of biased political corruption that goes on, and we need to speak about it. We need to talk about it. But there is no, these people have given up. So once again, this goes to show we need firmer leadership when it comes down to people from the community getting involved in politics. You have these people who have abandoned trying to be equal on both sides. You have people buying these guns. It's not going to stop the influx of guns. You're going to get an influx of criminals being arrested, but it's not going to stop the influx of guns, which you're doing is going to be very detrimental to the community, because you have people who have to have guns for survival. You're not policing the communities like you used to. You don't have substations every quarter mile. So a kid walking to school now, he has to fend for himself from the fentanyl, meth, crack, heroin addicts, from the hustlers out on the street, the criminal element out in the street. Now a 15-year-old kid living in that community must protect himself. And when you have other gangs in those communities as well, you may have to protect yourself from being a victim, being victimized. So now you're creating a situation where you have a kid who has to protect himself, possibly going to jail for a mandatory, I think they were trying to say it was like 10 or 15 years or something like that. So now you're creating a different type of environment. But there's no punishment for those people who were able to get that firearm purchased so that kid would have it. And that's where you guys dropped the ball at. So when you guys want to solve the problem, we will solve the problem. And so then the problem will persist, the problem will continue. The murder rate will continue. Criminals will not stop committing crimes because you're adding time if they get caught. It's not, they're just going to figure out ways to not get caught. Very simple. The police aren't out there policing the community. So, of course, the crimes are not going to stop because they're going to continue to commit these crimes. Now, it goes to speak to the police culture. If you're not out there no longer policing the community, I've spoke about this on another episode where in the International District in the 87108 used to have so many substations, like I said, almost a quarter mile away from each other. Used to have, just go down the list again. I'll just go down the list. So there was a Route 66, a Phillips 66 on Wyoming and Central. That was a substation. Then right down the street on Wyoming and Copper, that was a Circle K. That was another substation there. There was another Circle K at Pennsylvania and Central. There was another substation there. And there was another Circle K at Utah and Zuni. There was another substation there. Then you had down a little bit further down, Louisiana and Trumbull substation there. For part-time, the all subs right there off Zuni in Louisiana, there was a substation there. Then you went down to Catherine and San Mateo, there was a substation at that 7-Eleven. And there used to be a Circle K right there by Wilson Middle School. I want to say that was a Circle K, but on San Pedro right there. But there was one on San Pedro and Central at that Circle K. And then when you went further up at the 7-Eleven on by the University 7-Eleven, the one right before you get to Girard, and then the 7-Eleven at University and Central, the 7-Eleven at Gibson and Broadway, and I mean, I went a little further out my way, but just in general, the first, 5 to 6 were in the International District alone. So you don't have that. So for a kid who has to grow up in that community, it's not going to be a safe environment for him. So where is the reform? Where is the change? Where is the community policing? Where is the different approaches? Because these laws that you guys are putting into effect as far as increasing the penalties for people being caught with guns, like I said, is not going to affect the influx of guns. If I can buy a gun and sell a gun, they're going to buy a gun. Someone is going to buy a gun because there's always going to be that fringe element. People are always going to live in impoverished communities. Like I spoke about it before on another podcast, I had to go to school with a firearm because when I got off of school or when I stepped off campus for lunch, ain't no telling what gang member that was older than me would approach me or target me. So I didn't have the gun because I needed it at school. I needed the gun when I left school to make it home safe, and sometimes those older guys came onto campus. So different times, but that's what it was. So I felt like I needed the gun to defend myself, and that's what it was. And I never shot nobody at school, never was a school shooter, or anything like that. But that was the mentality that I had at 15, 16, 17 years old in school. So for you guys to change these laws this way, but not try to enforce, or you guys just basically folded to the extreme right-wing sheriffs that were or are still in office and have failed to follow up on that or to hold them accountable for even saying that they will not enforce laws. That is not what law enforcement is. So it's a broken system. The reform needs to start with people such as Leon Martin. This is the culture you guys have built. This is the culture that you guys have built. You have Sean Squillaby, because he's always squilling and whining about something his police can't do. His police can't do this, his police can't do that. So he's virtually rendered the people under him in his police union useless. These guys are glorified security guards, according to him, according to the narrative he pushes. Their hands are tied behind their back. They can't arrest nobody. I don't understand. So when they whine about protesters protesting police abuse, perfect example. So let's follow up on this Leon Martin case. This did happen on federal land, so hopefully he will get the maximum amount of time that he can serve for this. This goes back to the backlog of rape kits that they have at the department, where they are barely arresting people for rapes from 20 years ago. This is disgusting. This is so disgusting. Women, this goes to show you. So women voters, when you are coming up to vote, these are the type of issues. Don't fall for all the political hoopla. Make sure you're paying attention to what's going on. They just arrested a man for raping a girl in 1997. He moved on, started a business, had his own life. He was like 19 years old when this happened. So if he would have got caught then, he would have just, probably probation. So now he's an adult with a business, house, probably a family, and he's going to jail for rape. So now you men out there who think you can, take advantage of women, sexually assault women, these are the consequences you will face. People don't look fond upon rapists, and even in the criminal community. So here's a guy who sexually assaulted somebody when he was 19, moved to California, started a business, started a new life, a wife, family, kids probably. And then, here is the backlog of rape kits that the APD have been so incompetent about handling that they're just getting to the rape kits from 1997. It seems like this is ridiculous. So hopefully these victims get justice. And we need to understand who was in charge of handling these rape kits when this backlog started. Those people should never ever work in law enforcement, ever. This is what police reform is. Holding people accountable, because this is the department that is responsible for holding people accountable, along with the justice system. So we'll get to some more justice reform podcast episodes, but for now we're gonna continue to follow up on Leon Martin, and hopefully the victim gets justice in this case. It doesn't get swept under the rug. And y'all be mindful, be careful out there, ladies. Get you some guns, get you some self-defense training, get out of any type of toxic relationship that you're in. And don't be scared to speak. Don't be scared to say something. You know what I mean? This is a very important issue. One of the statistics that should stand out, it's very important. This needs to be addressed. Police brutality is the first complaint. The second highest complaint is sexual assault by police officer. So let's be clear, ladies. Let's be clear. they look at you just like they look at criminals. You're a piece of trash. You're worthless. So this is what police reform entails. Getting down to these numbers, getting down to the abuse. Maybe that's why these backlogs of rape kits at the APD police department have been backed up for over 20 years, I guess you could say. Maybe this is why, because you did have, an entire department who took over an investigation from a whole nother county, a whole nother town, when one of their police officers was accused of killing his wife and ruined a police officer's life from that town. And during that time, it was, we were dealing with those backlogs. So I wonder how many of these police officers, had cases pending for abuse or complaints or reprimands, disciplinaries, things that go in their file and don't really get dealt with legally. Let's talk about this. We shouldn't have the police union shouldn't have more power than the actual laws. So they shouldn't be able to negotiate if a police officer engages in inappropriate behavior, misconduct, or abuses of power, that he doesn't get held to the letter of the law. Instead, he gets disciplined and reprimand gets placed in his disciplinary file. So in essence, you're taking the power from the police. Saying kind of like how when people get mad when they talk about defunding the police. Well, I'm gonna use this as an example of how they defunded the police from doing their power. No overtime for investigating that fellow officer. So they're defunding the police. You shouldn't have a sexual assault case on a college campus be handled by the dean and a panel. They have their own police force. So now their police force and their policy supersede the letter of the law. It supersedes the letter of the law. So once again, now you're defunding the police because the actual police from that city can't go and investigate. They can't go and get no overtime. They can't go and get paid to investigate those rape allegations from those student athletes that make millions of dollars for that school. So they must protect their assets. This should not happen. And this is part of police reform. This is part of justice reform. These are things that when people are marching and protesting and other people on the sideline who don't agree with it, but they're quiet about things like this. They're quiet. They don't understand it's a bigger picture. And at the same time, you people protesting must understand, if you want to get things done, go and be a police officer. Go and write some policy and go in or help write some policy so change can happen. Marching isn't going to get it. So protesting isn't going to get it. It'll spread awareness, good promotion, but it's not going to make effective change unless you have the people behind that. So we must understand that police reform it's a lot to it, but when you start talking about these sexual assault cases, you have certain entities such as Sean Squillaby at the police union for APD, one of the police unions for APD, who, these people negotiate agreements with the police department where the officers in their union can't be held to the letter of the law. They must be disciplined and reprimanded, and that goes in a disciplinary file. So how many of these cases, it's a question that needs to be asked. Is this the reason why we have so many backup cases? Because you've had officers such as the ones who were so quick to go and help in Los Lunas, that officer. So all his buddies came down to help. So all these guys that are quick to defend other police officers who are abusive to their wives, and how many of them had cases, and Is this a reason why there's a backup? These are questions that need to be asked. Who is in charge of that? They never need to work in law enforcement, ever. Ladies who've been raped need to go after those people in charge of the police department at that time, because they are dragging their feet, effectively giving that your abuser has lived an entire lifetime, 20 years. Some of these guys may be even dead by now, so got away scot-free, and these are the nightmares that they don't want to talk about. This is the dropping of the ball, that no one wants to talk about when they're out there pom-pomming and cheerleading for each political side, and they're talking about what they're going to do for police reform and so on and so forth, for justice reform, and what they're going to do for the community. Let's get these things fixed. If you want to fix the problem, fix the problem. Stop playing games. Stop playing political games. So if we're not going to hold the people policing the community accountable, what's the purpose? They might as well just disband them, because obviously they have no power on university campuses. Obviously there's certain abuses that they have no power to hold them to the letter of the law because of union agreements. So these are questions that need to be asked, and these are things that need to be investigated, and we're just here to shed light on some of these issues and bring them to light. This is what happens, when you have someone like Leon Martin who sexually assaults someone, he pulls over for DUI. Things must change. So ladies, be aware at all times. Let's push this issue. There's a lot to digest, but yes, ladies, I think legal action needs to be taken against APD in the way the handling of this be rape kits. It's ridiculous. The auditors need to be ashamed of themselves for letting this slide through their hands for the past 20 years. Each individual auditor needs to be held accountable. I mean, I understand with everything going on now, but these are the things that need to be held accountable. You had Watchdog Balderas, and he let it slide through his fingers. I wonder why. It just so on and so forth. So let's stay focused on this, and let's hold these politicians accountable who say they're law and order and all this nonsense, all this political BS that they try to push on you people and that you people eat up. Let's hold them accountable for this. So on that note, we're going to end the podcast. We're going to follow up on this Leon Martin case. And ladies, protect yourselves. Like I said, don't stay in any kind of abusive, toxic relationship. And don't be quiet. You have a voice, and use it. On that note, stop playing with the church money. Man, y'all stay blessed.
I did it all for the money. I did it all for the money. When the player had to eat, that one a damn thing funny. I did it all for the money. I did it all before. Ride people so dope. Gang banging, shooting pistols, running from the dance folks. And I was known for eating anything you asked for. Soft hard.